Oh, buddy, we are live from the winter meetings with our good friend of the show, Lance Brozdowski. And Lance, even though we're not in the same place, I would sure hope you're enjoying some of the same weather as me. It's perfect here in Hawaii. What about you over there in Orlando?
Yeah, it's lovely. I haven't felt humidity in like 4 months living in Chicago, so this is something else. Yeah, it's great here. I'm outside. There's like, let's see, I don't know. I don't even really know where I am right now in relation to everything going on. But I found a little quiet spot that's outside, so I'm ready to talk
You're
some
not
ball.
you're not missing the negative 18-degree weather or whatever it was over there?
Oh God, please, man. I don't want to go back to that.
Sorry, you have to. You have to.
I do.
All right, guys. Hey, we've been really looking forward to this show with Lance. Do this every year with you, and you know, this is actually where you and I got to meet for the first time.
Yeah.
So pretty cool. Just how we continually do this annually, and right now there's a lot going on with the Cubs. We got people in the chat. I want to hear what your questions are for Lance. Please post them in the chat. We're going to leave some time there for that at the end. And if you have a good question, might even ask it while we're going here. But the big thing right now, Lance, just within the last couple hours, a couple big deals have happened, which is great for the winter meetings because we've seen a couple of these winter meetings the last few years be like, hey, what happened? Not much is going on. And so Kyle Schwarber, $150 million, going back to Philly. I was kind of surprised by that. And then Edwin Diaz, who I thought was also going to go back to the Mets, ends up going to the Dodgers for a few bucks more and 3 years. Your initial thoughts?
My initial thoughts is that both of these came out right when Scott Boras was talking here, which is just a hilarious move by Excel, who represents Schwarber, and I'm not entirely sure what Diaz is. Or Diaz is Wasserman. So, I mean, listen, agents are playing 3D chess here in terms of how they operate. I just thought it was so funny because that Boras thing is like, I don't even know how you describe it. It's like everyone, it's like an amoeba of people. It's like this, you can't even actually experience it. I think our guy, Bruce Levine from Marquee, was like in the pit of it, which was really cool. His mic flag was right there. But you can, like, people are like, I'm going to go to the Boris presser here. It's like, you don't go to the Boris presser because you can't see or hear anything. But yeah, that was my initial thought. From a contract standpoint, yeah, I think Schwarber at 30 mil is exactly right around the projection. Phillies seem to be a potential Kyle Tucker player. Obviously not now with Schwarber, I think. And then Diaz was interesting partially because I wasn't too far off from the Williams contract. I thought I saw a report that the Mets offered 3 for 66, and it sounds like the Dodgers went 3 for 69, and he took it. It sounds like the Mets were willing to partially defer money as well, which seems to be a large point in these getting to these massive AAVs on guys. It just requires a specific ownership group to actually do that. But yeah, I think both of them weren't totally surprising to me. Perhaps they were surprising to you, but I predicted Diaz to the Mets and Diaz to the Dodgers and Williams to the Mets in my YouTube video that I did on relievers. So check out my channel for that if you want to nerd out more.
Yeah, you definitely need to check out Lance's channel. If you're not, he's not just a marquee guy. He is a YouTuber and has amazing videos, especially breaking down a lot of pitching, which is what you're really good at. So I guess to me, it's just really funny, and we'll move on to Cubs stuff after this. To me, it's just really funny. People are like mad that he's going to the Dodgers. I'm not exactly happy that Diaz is going to the Dodgers, but at the same time, it's like, what did you expect? More money, better place to play, better development, and championship the last 2 years. Meanwhile, look what the Mets are doing. So what a shock.
I agree. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's tough to turn down a Dodger contract, especially when they're giving you more money. And even if you defer some of it, like, I mean, I get it. I get why guys go there. It's not really surprising.
You got to imagine that winning attracts winning and losing attracts losing. I mean, that's just what it comes down to.
Fair.
Anyway, Let's talk Cubs. You mentioned Bruce Levine. I thought it was absolutely hilarious, and I don't want to have to spend too much time on this, but you know, in the fan world of baseball, we all kind of know that Bob Nightingale, you have to wait and see if what he's tweeting is actually true. And then, of course, there's this report last week that Zach Gallen is going to the Cubs from Bob Nightingale for 22 per year. And then shortly after that, he retracts. And then shortly after that, Jeff Passan says, no, they're not even close. Then you and Bruce Levine yesterday on Marquee find out that Zach Gallen was actually getting married at the time that Bob Nightingale was making this claim in Cabo. So he wasn't even by his phone. He wasn't by a pen. I mean, as you're more of an analytics guy. I wouldn't really categorize you as a reporter, but just being in that same industry, does that just kind of make you giggle? Like,
yeah,
what's the reaction there as being a guy in that industry?
It's interesting, man. Like I definitely had aspirations at times of being like more of a newsbreaker and stuff. It's very difficult to get people to tell you things on the record, and relationships are so huge in this industry that a lot of the times you have conversations that you just can't really say anything about, or perhaps they inform some subtle decision making around like what you think of a given player or something, but they're not going to like drive a larger conversation around, I'm breaking this. So like getting sources over that line is often sometimes difficult. And I've run into that at times, and I, for the most part, have just stayed away from it because I value the relationships a bit more. Doesn't mean you can't get info out of them. It just means you're not going to be the first on a lot of the stuff. But listen, I don't know Nightingale. He's done more in this industry probably than I ever will. So I'm not going to critique him at all. It's just crazy to me that like you have to imagine his process was to send some kind of message to the Cubs on this, right? And it's like I sent some messages to various people in the Cubs org when this happened, and they were all just like, "No, not happening, not even close." Didn't even talk to him. You know what I mean? It was just like very like they were laughing. Like I think it's just like it's wild to me. Like I guess this is the price of being first, right? It's like if you can't get it confirmed, then you have a decision to make as a reporter, so whether you just want to tweet it out and see what happens, or you want to wait and get it confirmed to get beat. So if that's your currency, then I get that pressure. My currency as an analyst is different. I'm much more of like the slow thinker around pitchers, how they're doing, how do you project them, et cetera. And that provides a different set of circumstances in terms of how I operate. But getting way too into the nitty gritty of reporting here. But yeah, that was funny. And we'll see if Gallen even ends up as a large target for for the Cubs. I know Mooney had him in his piece. It seems like it's Amai, King, and Gallen were the three mentioned. I've heard various things on all three of those guys, as the probability they actually end up a Cub, which we could probably talk about a bit more.
Yeah. So now that you're at the winter meetings, what are you hearing, especially from the Cubs side of things? What's your expectation here in the next couple of days? Do you expect the Cubs to be leaving with a starting pitcher, with the conversation of just getting to a starting pitcher? Kind of tell me what vibe you're getting from the people that you're talking to.
My vibe is that things are moving slower than people think. And I'm not saying that about the Cubs specifically. I'm saying that more generally. I do think this is emblematic, or you can notice this in these two larger transactions around Schwarber and such, Diaz happening right at that Boras press conference. Like, I imagine those maybe happened last night or something, and they knew about it and held it. But yeah, it seems like things are moving slower. It seems like, you're re-engaging on trade talks, you're engaging on a variety of things, but I would expect no massive move to happen on the Cubs side in the next, let's say, 48 hours, which would push us to when teams start to head out of here tomorrow night post Rule 5 draft. So we'll see. Like, I hope I'm wrong. It's just the vibe I've gotten is that I don't think sides are close on a lot of things from a trade perspective. Very much seems like the Cubs are circling on the three pitchers we just talked about. And yeah, maybe this goes for the larger point. Maybe not a Cubs critique at all. It's just maybe there are no larger trade that happen in the next 48, and it spills into next week. We've seen in the past that like a lot of these conversations that end up resulting in larger trades happen as a byproduct of the winter meetings. This happened with the Tucker trade, if I remember correctly. I imagine the Cubs engaged around the winter meetings, and then it happened, I believe, a week or so after that, in the middle of December. So I think this is obviously things. I cut out there. I don't know if I was still in here, but this is obviously the time people want these conversations, but I don't think you can force them. I think they just happen when they naturally happen. And right now, I think the market's a little bit slow.
Close to 100 people watching right now. Guys, if you have questions for Lance, go ahead and throw them in the chat. I'm going to just keep on running with winter meeting stuff until I see some good questions. I do see one from Joan. I'll get to yours in a second here. So, Lance, you've mentioned a few names, King, Amai. I've also heard Suarez. I've heard this, Edward Cabrera potential trade
Mm.
surfacing again. Of course, everyone wants to hear more about Mackenzie Gore. There's two different things that we continue to hear this offseason is that it's either going to be one big signing, right, for the Cubs and maybe a few smaller trades, or it's going to be one big trade and then maybe a decent amount of supporting cast members of another top reliever or something like that. What do you think is going to be the bigger target for the Cubs? Is it going to be and we know it's the starting pitcher, so I'm focusing strictly on starting pitching right now. Do you think it's going to come via trade, or you think it's going to come via a big free agent?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I would say the way I think about it is more monetarily. So, like, if we think the Cubs are spending another, like, let's say we assume they're spending up to the first luxury tax amount. We don't exactly know what the budget is in terms of how much they're spending. Perhaps if you get into the other realm of like maybe this year makes a lot of sense for them to spend into the first luxury tax amount because they have so much coming off the books. Something I've speculated and I think makes a lot of sense. If you really want to push payroll this year, it makes sense. You got a ton of guys coming off, so you can reset and get out of that multi-year tax problem that a lot of these owners don't seem to like, which again makes a lot of sense. So I look at it more from like, okay, if the Cubs have, let's say, anywhere from $35 to $50 million to spend, somewhere in that window, we don't entirely know where. I'm going to assume it's somewhere in there. Then, if you think of a larger piece taking a chunk of that, and you still probably have to leave between 5 and 10 mil buffer as you want to make in-season moves at the deadline. So I find it hard to figure out how multiple pieces fit given those parameters, if that makes sense. The most
Mm-hmm.
logical approach to me, and I'm not entirely sure where it is, I think it's a little lower probability than perhaps the market's made it seem, is like, okay, you upgrade third with Alex Bregman, you pay him probably 5 for 150. Maybe it's the Schwarber deal. He's going to get around 30 a year. Maybe you build in opt-outs, but that takes of your proverbial pie of 45-ish million, $50 million, it takes like all of it. So then the only way you can upgrade beyond that is through a trade. So then it makes sense. Okay, you push Matt Shaw to another team, you get a pitcher back. The other approach is like you sign Mai, and that's say 22-ish a year plus posting fees. And then again, that leaves you another, let's say 20 to 30 mil. That's not going to probably get you anybody but Suarez. And then you can maybe go grab another pitcher. So the way I say this is like, I think you're correct. I just think of it more from the monetary perspective. That I think it's more likely that Bregman's off the table, those higher dollar bats are off the table, and it's maybe a slightly lower dollar value Suarez that then results in a trade for pitching, or it's pitching in the form of a Mai that then results in the form. Maybe you just accept the current bats they have and you add a Rob Refsnyder, whoever, to platoon with Casey in right field, or you give Mo some more work by Asteros. So I'm thinking of it more from like, we need to see the first large domino fall, which I guess for the Cubs isn't even relatively large relative to these guys making 30 million plus. But I wouldn't say the Suarez probability is high. I still think Michael King makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And it's not surprising that the names being rumored are in that 20 to 22-ish million dollar a year window, which still leaves them a bit of flexibility to go maybe add a reliever for 5 or something along those lines, but unlikely to me that it's a large bat upgrade. So I will say arm upgrade of some kind, whether it's Gallon, King, or Mai. And then there's really no bat upgrade aside from Refsnyder. Maybe you add some pen arms. And that's my prediction for what the offseason looks like. I hope that I'm missing the larger machinations of some trade. You think of the last 2 huge trades the Cubs made, right? Not talking deadline. Kyle Tucker, Michael Busch. I don't think there was any speculation on around either of those trades happening prior to them actually occurring, which tells you a lot about how the Cubs operate. Like, we got a lot of amazing reporters on this beat. Jesse Rogers, Sahadev Sharma, like really good people, I think do awesome work, but the Cubs are very good at not telling you what they're going to do. So like, maybe this is a starter we're not even thinking about, Like, I'm trying to go galaxy brain. If it's not Cabrera, if it's not Joe Ryan, if it's not Mackenzie Gore, like, who could it be? Is it Chris Bubik? Like, is that the name we haven't heard a ton, Maybe that's a little cheaper than going after a Gore, So I'm trying to figure out like what we're not talking about that is somewhat high probability. And I think that that's probably the smart way to approach it.
Yeah. I mean, just to play that game, is there anyone that you didn't mention there that you've just been like, this would be a fun one?
Bubik is the one that I threw in there that I think we heard a little at the beginning of the offseason, and I do believe makes some sense. I struggle to see any names outside of these guys, though, like controllable starting pitching on a team that is willing to trade it. Probably going to look outside of the division. Like how many years of control are they looking? The Cubs like these projects, so it's like I'm a little bit skeptical that they go after like a Joe Ryan, who's like just a complete. I mean, he's an unbelievable pitcher. I just think the price there is insane. Gore makes some sense, but I think the move on Gore, from my perspective, is like if I'm Taboni, who's come in there now as their president of baseball ops or GM, I'm not entirely sure his exact title, but if I know the prior regime did a relatively poor job on the pitching development side, right? Like you saw Kyle Finnegan go to the Tigers and completely change his mix immediately. Like they didn't do the best job. You bring in Taboni, like Gore is a clear uptick candidate for me. And like they give him 4 months of runway, and all of a sudden he puts up a 2.5 ERA over 100 innings. You don't tell me at the deadline he's getting the exact same, if not more value than he's presently getting. You still
Yeah.
retain 2 postseasons for him. You have him on his 30 of ARB. It's going to cost a bit, but like I think from Taboni's perspective, this is like a weird lull in Gore's value where teams are like, oh, maybe he's not that good. There's injury risk. But if that dude comes out and shoves, like it's more valuable for the Nats to hold him to the deadline. So I'll continue to say what I said at the trade deadline, where the gaps between what teams want for controllable starting pitching and what teams are willing to offer is still large. And I'm waiting to see the one team that can converge that gap. And I don't think we're close on a lot of these names. So I'm curious to see if we're just in the same boat we were at the deadline, where we end up early next season and no controllable starting pitchers were moved, and the Cubs end up going after a 1 or a 2 year guy, and we'll see from there. Yeah, that's where my brain's at.
So you said it already, and I think you and I might be on the same page, but these reports of like, am I being a top guy for the Cubs? I just don't personally buy into it. I
Top
do
guy in terms of
personally,
target, you're saying?
in terms of a target, because
Okay.
maybe a target, but I don't see it happening. And
hmm
the reason being is because we haven't seen the Cubs go over $184 million for a contract. And, all reports tell me it's going to be in that neighborhood for that kind of guy, especially a guy who's never thrown a pitch in the major leagues. Michael King seems like the perfect fit for the Cubs. And I know
Yeah.
that a lot of people are like, oh, we didn't get Dylan Cease. King would be a disappointment. I think people forget how good King was a couple years ago when he was fully healthy. And I think that people are greatly undervaluing him. And if you can get him for around the same or less than what you just signed Shota to for 1 year, I think it's a steal. That's where I'm personally at. But overall, the bigger question is just, what do you think is more likely to happen for the Cubs? Is it a King, or do you think that Amaya is actually a potential guy for them?
Yeah, the Amai stuff's interesting. I think I would anticipate, and this is Kylie McDaniel, but I would anticipate his contract not eclipsing Hayward if they were to sign him at the one. Was it at 184? I think Amai would be like a 130 guy, and then you pay posting fee. So the total like all in value of the contract's going to be 150 to 160. Seems to be where everybody's globbing around,
Yeah.
because of that posting fee element. But it'll register as like a 6 for 30 or 5 for 100, whatever it ends up being. But yeah, I think it's a possibility. I have a feeling that there's going to be another team that's willing to give him perhaps more money or more years. And we run into prior situations where the Cubs are competitive, but
Yeah.
not willing to like push beyond what perhaps their internal models say on his quality as a pitcher or his projection, which I think there's a lot of variance because again, he's coming over from overseas. We don't know. We don't know. The ball literally moves different there. Like this is a huge implication in terms
Yeah.
of talking to pitching people in terms of how his fastball will look. It's not going to move as much. He's a weird pitcher. He does a lot of weird things. The advantage is that he has like a really low release, so his angles are good. It's really what the teams are targeting, I think, in the fact that his command's gotten really good over the last couple of years. So I think it's totally fair to say they're competitive on him. I anticipate them not being the team that goes over the finish line. My prediction would probably be ends up an Oriole. I think that'd be kind of fun. Be an
Orioles.
interesting team, kind of
Wow.
random, but I feel like they need something to move. Helsley was an interesting decision. I think they have the budget to go after a guy at that $22 million point. We don't have to talk Orioles. I like Michael King a lot. I think he's one of my favorite pitchers in this market. I've heard generally that the injury stuff he ran into last year is not something teams are too worried about heading into the season. I struggle sometimes, and I say that because I struggle a lot of the times when I read articles and at the end of it, it's like he has injury concerns, and it's like cool. Like I think, you're a probabilistic thinker. A lot of people try to be, like that's how teams think around these injury things. So just saying the guy's injury concerns, like there's far different levels of injury concern. Like Zach Eflin's a guy I've heard a ton having a lot of injury concerns in the market. Very different injury concerns than Michael King, who's you could argue a bit more blippy. He ran into some tipping stuff potentially at the end of the year that is probably pretty fixable. But if you could get him for 4 for 88, like I think that's a slam dunk. You're of course accepting a bit of risk, but everybody in this 20 to $24 million window has risk. That's why they're not getting $30 million a year like Dylan Cease, for example. So I think King makes a ton of sense for the Cubs. I really like King personally. I think he's an incredibly sharp dude, very cerebral in terms of how he approaches the game as well. I had some really fun combos with him in the past. when he's a Padre at Wrigley that I really enjoyed, that always stuck with me. Um, yeah, he's a smash. He's a slam dunk. It's just a matter of whether the Cubs want to go 4 for 88 on him, or if another team will, or another team goes to the fifth year. It seems like all these guys we're seeing, international markets, et cetera, are all just getting an extra year, which is partially surprising to me. But
Yeah.
does a team go 5 for 100 on King? I don't know. Or would it be less? It'd be a little bit lower than that. But you get what I'm saying.
Oh, for
So it'd be
sure.
5 for
For sure.
110. But yeah, I mean, I love King. I would run that to the bank if I got approval to spend
Cool.
$88 million of the Cubs money.
Yeah, yeah, I like him too. I like him a lot. Great question here from Joan. Lance, what is your assessment of Shota going back to his 2024 success? What do you think he needs to fix and how? And that's a huge question because everyone keeps acting like that was a bad re-sign. But if he's back to 2024, you got another ace.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of recency bias with Shota. I understand he wasn't good at the end of the year, but even if he's even if he's not great at the end of the year again and he's not a playoff starter, he's still probably going to pay off the $22 million. Seems like a lot, but if you look at like dollar per WAR, that's going to net out totally fine. I think it's pretty much all velocity here. This is just be a simple answer. If you look down a full tick, if you look at his splits year over year in terms of how his fastball performed when it was like above 91.5 versus below 91.5, there's stark differences. He's up a ton more barrels, misses less bats. Like it's as simple as that. I love that he's already down at Cressy and seems to have interacted with them. I mean, I imagine he would be back to the 2024 version of himself. The reason you would be perhaps partially skeptical of that is like, okay, he's never had this soft tissue hamstring stuff. Does that just create something in his body that he now has to get over and is difficult for him to get over? But again, I mean, I love the concept that he's already working on it, and I don't have a lot of doubt that he'll provide value over the contract that he's been given, and there's very little risk given it's a 1-year contract. So I think they kind of need him in the rotation. Like if they didn't have him, then maybe you could have been more aggressive on like its seats or something. But with him, like you have to get to 1,400 or so innings as a team. Like I'm happy for him to pick up 160 of those and then see where it is in October. I think people are overacting a little bit too much to how poor he was down the stretch.
Yeah, and we got Chai Cubs Agony right there with you. Says Velo is the number one. So let's kind of shift over a little bit here. You mentioned the Bregman possibility. I also think that's probably kind of a long shot. What would you say is this organization's mindset right now? Are they in this mindset of, based on who you're talking to, are they in the mindset of like, hey, we won 92 last year. Now it's time to go out and win 95, win a division? Or are they more on, hey, like Shaw looked good. Let's see if he can develop. PCA had an all-star season. Let's see if he can do that again. We like what KC and Ballesteros have, and more in this idea of like, instead of a winning window, it's a winning, because I'm looking out at the ocean right now. It's a winning landscape, right? Like let's develop the young guys, and if we only win 90 games this year, it's okay because we didn't give up those guys. Where do you think this organization is at in terms of that mentality?
The dirty secret of baseball is that every team operates with this, what you'd call like a win range. I don't entirely know if this is correct, but this is how I think about it. I know Brendan Miller of CHGO does a great job thinking of it this way as well. You essentially take your projection, you sum it up, and you look at how many games your team's projected to win, and then purely based on how sequencing luck occurs in a given season, like when you get a big hit, when a guy blows a save, when you happen to score 12 runs, like you end up with like a 6 to 7 win variance. So if your team is projected to win 87 games, you could win anywhere from 80 to 94. And that seems like a massive difference, right? Imagine the perception going into the offseason, the Cubs win 80 versus 94. Those are all like not equally probable outcomes, but within a range where you would go, this was not unforeseen. And that is, I think, like the dirty secret of baseball as a whole, is that it's very difficult, I think, to operate like the Dodgers and other teams where your baseline win is 95, but because you're so postseason focused, you can go and spend a bunch of money on Edwin Diaz, $70 million on a closer, and not even bat an eye, because you understand that like Diaz's value, even if Diaz misses April, May, June, and July, it doesn't matter, because as long as Diaz is there in October, it's cool with them. You know what I mean? This is what they do. They're very lenient with their starters, for example, in terms of coming off injury. Like they are guaranteeing, because their floor is so high, that they're going to win like 88 a year, because they're projected again to win, say, 95. that is like the secret of baseball. It's unfortunate. It's just how teams operate. It's very hard, I think, to move out of that. We have this average win total, and we're just trying to raise the floor slightly such that, the bottom is 84-ish wins and we can still be competitive, run into some sequencing luck. All of a sudden, we're a playoff team. Anything can happen in the playoffs. But I think we're getting to the point where, like, the teams that are consistently winning in the playoffs are the ones that are willing to accept some of that risk up front. They're willing to be the Dodgers and say we need to overpay. We're seeing with the Blue Jays, I would argue to some extent, which is really interesting in the AL, where like they're not operating like the Dodgers, but they clearly have some money burning a hole in their pocket. They were a great team last year. They made some fundamental changes internally, and now they're willing to go out. They're probably going to spend, I think, on another reliever, I would argue, or based on what I've heard. And I don't think a lot of teams have the appetite to like take that risk. They'd rather make like smart financial decisions from like we will be good. We don't need to be Blue Jays good or Dodgers good to be in the dance, and we'll go from there. And it sucks sometimes, and you have to square that as a fan. It's just like the team isn't going to be the Dodgers or the Blue Jays in terms of spending money. And that's kind of how I view them. It's like they're a smart financial team and they make a lot of marginal gains. Their big dub is that they got Brad Keller at 1.5, and now he's going to go make, I don't know, is he going to make 2 for 22 as a starter? Like, that's incredible. He got signed for $1.5 million. You don't think they're looking at that internally and going like, that is what we need more of? They're not looking at it and going, we need more Dylan Ceases. And I
Right.
get that from an operations standpoint. I just think that's how a lot of teams like the Cubs operate. And there's nothing wrong with it. You know what I mean? Like, they're allowed to do whatever they want with the money they are given from a budgetary standpoint to spend. It's just, I get the fan angle of like, you want them to be more aggressive because it feels like this team, had a window last year. They just weren't willing to push it at the deadline and go for pieces that maybe would have pushed them over the top. But I hope I'm wrong. Like, I'm hoping they're willing to accept a little bit of risk in trade, where it's like, we'll trade some of these prospects because we think Gore over the next 2 years has the potential to be a Cy Young candidate in the NL, which I would argue
Okay.
he does. So, like,
Yeah.
I would love that, but again, is that in the range of outcomes? Does their model internally like the fact that I would imagine, have to give up something like Jackson Wiggins and more, and probably considerably
Yeah.
more to get that done? Like, that's a tough pill to swallow. But again, I'm
Yeah.
obviously the one not spending the money. I'm a little bit more risk accepting than perhaps they are.
Well, I think to your point, if they go and get Bregman, which again, I'm not hoping for that, nor do I think that is likely, but we didn't think that Kyle Tucker was coming to the Cubs either, and that happened. So if they go and get Bregman and then they trade Matt Shaw and Jackson Wiggins for like a Gore, that's two massive upgrades.
Sure,
This
that is a
offseason.
short term.
Massive.
This team will be amazing, and your floor goes
Yeah.
to 90, 92 wins probably, and I
Yeah.
would absolutely love that. I would sign off on that immediately. That team is considerably better. The offense, if
Absolutely.
you only add Rob Refsnyder and another bench piece to this offense, they're not going to be as good as they were last year.
No.
Maybe in some grand universe, they have like a 1 to 3% chance of being better than last year if Casey is incredible and PCA levels out and Matt Shaw takes an offensive jump. But like, 3 young dudes doing all that in the same season is like, man, that's like that's like rolling
Yeah.
an incredible going on an incredible run in craps. You know what I mean? Like, it's just not likely to happen.
100%. So let's go back to the bullpen for a second here, just
Sure.
because I mean, we can talk until we're blue in the face of what we think might happen at the winter meetings, but I think you made a really good point, and that is some of the biggest things that we've seen the Cubs do the last couple of years, the Tucker trade, the Michael Busch trade, didn't happen until we didn't know about it until the 11th hour. So you mentioned the bullpen. You're a huge pitching guy. Talk to me about this formula that like Jed has figured out of let's just bring in a bunch of guys on minor league deals and non-roster invites, and let's see what Tommy can do now that not Hottie, sorry, now that Zombro is in the mix as well. Let's see what they can do. Like, can you just stop for a second and not just appreciate, but also like try to put into words, being the genius that you are on the pitching side, how this continues to work? And also, who's been kind of one of the bigger cogs in that wheel to make sure that when a guy like Thielbar and Keller and Pomeranz come in, that they actually can click right away?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, I think Zombro's had a massive impact on this organization, and congrats to him. He got a little bit of like a title bump and responsibility bump, which I imagine he's super happy and pumped about. And I also think like the subtle thing there is that I'm curious to see what he does on the minor league side, because they are very pitching depleted right now in the minors. It's probably one of the worst farm systems from a pitching standpoint in all of baseball. I'd probably put it bottom 3 or
Great to hear
4.
that.
It's not good. Like I think Jackson Wiggins is a very good pitching prospect, but beyond that, you're talking about guys who are injured or, Justin Florentino at A ball who's throwing 89, but people like him because he jumped 4 miles per hour year over year and he's probably 6 years away, you know? So it's like it's barren. Dominic Reed, we'll see. Like they have some like King Kep or who's the Caleb Wing, excuse me. We'll see. I don't want to get into pitching prospect stuff. I think the larger point here is the Cubs are a very model-driven team. Everyone in baseball will tell you this. And I think they do a great job on the R&D side, getting to like what that objective number is from the modeling standpoint. So by modeling, I just mean like taking a bunch of variables in and trying to output things into an individual number and understanding like what goes into that number from a value perspective, and then wrecking that to how much you have to pay a guy, And then I'd say the sauce on top of it is like, okay, our model says this guy's X. And we already think perhaps he's a value if we do absolutely nothing. But now we have the opinion of Tommy Hotovy, the opinion of Tyler Zombro, Otero before he left now for the Red Sox did a great job, I think, in a variety of aspects with the Cubs from a pitching standpoint. That'd be Ryan Otero. Is now with the Red Sox. Brezel pulled him back there. But you think of like the sauce on top is those guys going, oh, we can do X, Y, Z here. Like I see something posturally off with Brad Keller. If we adjust that, you only want to pay him 1.5 mil. Like I think he could end up putting back 10 mil of value. And like, again, that is the sauce, is like understanding now ball flight, understanding how to get a guy towards different shapes that perhaps solve some issues. If he has an issue versus left-handed hitters, does he need a 2-strike pitch? Does he need like a downer curve, or does he need just a raw strike pitch? What if we go to a cutter? We're getting so good as a baseball whole at IDing those things. I wouldn't say I'm not in an organization, but like they are getting so good at IDing these things that we can just take a picture, change some things, and all of a sudden the projection that we currently have on him is incorrect, or it's not incorrect, but we have some awesome upside here. And when you hit that upside, it looks incredible. It looks like a Brad Keller. So it's, again, getting back to the point of like, how much do you want to spend? Perhaps the Cubs just want to take 6 chances on the next Brad Keller. Because if you get 2 of those to hit, the ROI there is
100%.
far greater than it is by spending it on an Edwin Diaz and hoping that you can unlock somehow the value on Edwin Diaz. Or honestly, on Diaz, there's downside risk there, right? Like each of the last 4 years, he's had an ERA above 3.5, So like, if you're going to get 3.5 out of him over 60 innings, he's now worth $23 million a year as a reliever. It's far more worth it to go after a Keller, pay him 1.5, then all of a sudden, boom. But you can see how this is fragile, right? Like, what if you don't hit on all 6 of those guys? What if Edwin Diaz is the correct play if you're trying to build a floor? But I would say like that is the way that the Cubs are doing really well, and a lot of other teams are doing well. Awesome modeling, incredibly sharp people building those models, the ability for coaches to understand what the model's perhaps missing, layering their sauce on top based on their experience, the art of pitching, you could argue, and then all of a sudden capturing all this value. So this is why I don't think they want to spend on relievers for the most part, or they like Maton in relative to the market. Again, cuts his fastball, awesome sweeper, fixed his lefty problem last year. So like maybe they see another tweak there. Maybe they like him at, what did they pay him, 7.5 or in that window? Maybe they think he could get $10 to $12 million of value by doing X, Y, Z. And already, again, at that 7.5, if he's the exact same pitcher he was last year, they're more than content to take him. And I think that you see more chance to unlock higher rungs of value on guys when they're cheaper. It's hard to look at a $25 million pitcher and be like, no, I think he's $27 million worth of value, or he misses 50 games, then you're losing $13 million of value because he's missing half the season or something like that. So that's kind of how I think about it, I would say, and try to distill as much as possible into like, why are the Cubs good at pitching development?
Yep. By the way, the Los Angeles Angels are acquiring infielder Vaughn Grissom in a trade with the Boston Red Sox from ESPN.
Okay, interesting.
Jeff Passan. Yeah, that just broke. I've been waiting for something to break for the Cubs while we're on here. Last year we had the amazing breaking news of Gage Workman on our live, if you remember that. And that turned out so well.
That turned out
great. To your point, man, I mean, I think the bullpen is the thing I'm the least concerned about. The only downside of this plan that they continue to do is that you see in April, they're still trying to put the pieces together, and that leads to a lot of maybe missed opportunities in April if you look back on the last couple of years. But if that means that they're great from May and on, I'm great with the plan. All right. Was hoping for some great questions in the chat. We just have a lot of guys fighting in the chat right now. So I'm going to just do one more call to action here because I would really like to have a couple more questions from fans. For Lance, we've only got him for another 5 or 10 minutes here. He's very, very busy in Orlando. So thank you again for putting some time in here with us, Lance.
It's funny because it's not even like I'm that busy. It's just like there's like a variety of things that like are happening generally, and then when you walk from point A to point B, as I mentioned, like you just get tied
well,
up for
like
30 minutes somehow, and it's like hilarious.
like I mentioned to you, and I know you're humble, but it's just because you're so popular, and that's why you're so
I
busy.
appreciate that. Thanks.
So my last question is sticking with the theme of the winter meetings. In the next, call it 48 hours, what type of signing or trade is most likely in your mind? Starting pitching, a bat, a relief pitcher, and if there is a name or two that you think is most likely while you're still there in Orlando, let's just put that on the table.
Yeah, it's a good one. I don't necessarily know if I have a good one for you here. I would say that it's it's boring, but I wonder if it's like a minor league free agent sign, like another Scott Kingery type, or maybe what we're talking about here, where they have a pitcher in mind that they are going to
Yeah.
get on a 2-way contract or whatever, the spring invite, to potentially make the
Minor
40,
league
or maybe they,
catcher.
yeah, or something along those lines, where it's like I'd say it's probably on the pitching side or something. But I think the name I throw out, and I've heard this name from I believe Mike Strami and some others, is Ryan Stanek. He's another guy that I think is not going to cost a lot. I do think the Cubs are finally realizing the value of velocity in their bullpen. If you look at the last 4 years of trend, like last
Mhm.
season, they finally jumped up and were throwing really hard, which is great to see. Stanek, I think, fits that mold, but he also fits the mold of what we were talking about in terms of him being like an underperformer each of the last couple of years. And I wonder whether the Cubs are looking at him with a tweak, going, "We think this guy could get back to, like a 3.5 to 3.75 in that area. Like not going to be a great reliever, but fits into the pen. He's another piece for Council to play with. He's probably going to be cheap, and he throws 97 plus 98. So like he
Yeah.
would fit in that velo sense. So I don't know. I'm not going to predict it, but like he's a name I've heard, and it's not surprising that other people have heard it as well.
Okay.
So I wouldn't be stunned if there's like a small move like that happened in the next 48 to 72 hours.
Well, like you said, you were right on Devin Williams and Edwin Diaz. So, I mean, might as well put Stanek on the Cubs now.
Yeah, I think
like,
the name that I had going to the Cubs in that video was Kenley Jansen. I have zero clue if the Cubs actually like Kenley Jansen, but I thought he made some sense from like they tended in the last couple of years to go after like older guys, like a Presley type,
yes, yes.
and like I think Jansen's like kind of a weird pitcher where he's gotten really good ball and play results. And I think the Cubs like that from like a modeling standpoint. He's a weird pitcher and he'd be a fun vet. Like, I don't know, would he take a 1-in-7? I don't know. Like his market seems to be a little hotter than that, but he's a fun name too. I have zero interest. I have zero clue if the Cubs actually like him, but I had to get a reliever to the Cubs in that video. And I was debating Fairbanks versus Jansen. And I got more pushback on Fairbanks being a possibility for the Cubs. So I went with Jansen.
Let's just do one of those this year, right? A veteran that might be on their last year or two and not DFA them and actually have some success by like June. So no Neris, no Presley, please.
Yeah.
Good question here from, I'm going to butcher the name. Let's go with EPAD JP10. If you had to choose next year to, do you think the team has more opportunity with Casey in right field and Seiya at DH, or Seiya in right field and Ballesteros DHing? Goes on to say, I like Ballesteros a little bit better at DHing.
I think I prefer Casey and right. I've said on other podcasts, I think I said it on our Cubs Weekly pod at Marquee, is like I think that Ballesteros is the one player on this team that I really struggle to see where he fits. Partially because if you want to play Casey, like I don't think the Cubs love the concept of Seiya starting 150 games in right field, Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm totally fine if he wants to play, you're facing a lefty, he goes out to right. What is that going to happen 30 to 40 times a year? He gets 30 to 40 starts in right, totally fine. I think you could accept that. I thought he was actually surprisingly pretty good in right field last season as a defender, which I didn't expect.
Yeah,
But I would say
he was better.
the problem is when you face left-handed pitching, you would be putting a guy like Ballesteros at a slight disadvantage. So, you know what I mean? Because he's left, and he'd be DHing, and you're not going to want to DH a left. So he probably wouldn't start in those situations, So it's I struggle to see where Ballesteros fits from like how does this guy get to 500 plate appearances, 600 plate appearances without an injury? I'm just going to assume health on everybody. This is, I think, the way to operate until told otherwise. But Casey makes a lot more sense to me. Casey plus Rob Refsnyder in right field, if that ends up happening, makes a ton of sense. Refsnyder is fantastic versus lefties. He doesn't need to be an everyday player. Provides a little bit of veteran presence. He plays right when Casey faces a left-handed pitcher. Casey's out there every day. Otherwise, say as full-time DH. That to me makes the most sense. It bounces out their team, doesn't put Ballesteros in a weird spot. I think I'm more confident in the floor of Ballesteros as a hitter, but
Mhm.
I'm less confident in how he fits from an let's get this guy to 500 plate appearances in a season.
Sure.
I really struggle to see where he's getting
Yeah,
ABs unless
I
say it's
agree.
full time in right field, which I don't think makes any sense because they literally were trying to get off that last season. So where they all of a sudden are like now all of a sudden Saya's a right fielder, like it just seems so weird to me to do that. And I think Casey's a better defender than Saya.
Yeah.
So you get the defense upgrade. I think Casey has a bit more power potential, and I would say he has a bit more like upside in his bat. From like if everything clicks, all of a sudden you're looking at a dude who has 30 homers, even if it's a low average. But I think the Cubs make a lot of contact as a team. Otherwise, I don't mind accepting some in zone miss risk with the potential to have a 30 homer bat alongside a Michael Busch type
Yeah.
against right-handed pitching. I think they would crush right-handed pitching with Casey in there if Casey can round into form and be the player that I think a lot of people think he could be.
Yep. I think some of the best news we could get by February at spring training is that Moises Ballesteros has been working on his catching for
Yeah,
the entire offseason, and suddenly he looks like a legitimate third catcher for the Cubs. Then
that
I
would
think
be incredible.
you could start to talk about 500 bats for that bat now.
Yep, I
But
totally agree. Totally agree.
I think with what we know about that and also how young he is, I don't think that can be the expectation right now.
Agreed.
I'm going to end it with this question because let's just go pie in the sky.
Let's do it.
Craig says, what will it take for a Tarek Skubal
Let's go, baby.
starting trade, starting with a Matt Shaw opening offer? I think you got to throw Wiggins in there and I mean everyone. You got to throw the whole boat in there, don't you?
It's interesting because I do feel like it's a tough one. Guys on 1 year getting paid, he'll probably get a decent ARB contract this year. I'm not entirely sure what his projections off the top of my head, but he's not going to be cheap, you know? Not going to be like below, I mean, he's probably going to get like 15 to 20 mil, I would imagine. I'm not entirely sure. But I would say that he returns less than everybody thinks. The guys that are going to return more are the multiple years of control. So I would say if you offered Matt Shaw and Jackson Wiggins, I think that deal gets done. I think the Tigers would accept that. But the problem
just
here,
those two.
yeah, it's 1 year control, and you have he's hitting the market, and you probably have a very little probability of re-signing him, given the fact that he's going to get the biggest contract in history for a pitcher, I would imagine. So I think that situation it's weird, and the reason I say it would only cost that is because I don't think the Tigers would actually accept that, if that makes sense, because the value to them of having Skubal for the entire season, potentially winning the AL Central again, taking him into the postseason, is going to exceed whatever they run into from an offer standpoint. You know, like it's just unless they're completely the only way they could trade him is if something catastrophic happens, that team is way out of it in the middle of July, and they're like, "This is all we can do because we're not going to make the playoffs with Skubal." If they're remotely in it, Skubal makes such an impact on that team that like it just doesn't make sense to trade him, in my opinion. So I would say it's like below 5% chance he gets traded. I would say this season, maybe that's a hot take. Just because I think the Tigers are going to be a good team, and I think he's going to be relevant to them late. But again, if he is traded, I think that return would be lighter than people think. The big return is going to be on a Joe Ryan or a Gore, where you have multiple years of control. Yeah. Or Crochet style, where we saw a first round pick go from that recent draft and other pieces. So, I don't think you need to give the world for Scuba. I just don't think the Tigers are going to take anything, really.
Yep. All right. Well, my big takeaways from this conversation is we can't, as Cubs fans right now, expect in the next 24 to 48 hours that there's going to be a big signing, but this is the stomping grounds for those starting conversations.
Yeah.
We should continue to see the bullpen being built the same way. And while there is conversations about Bregman or an upgrade in a bat, it might be less likely than going after a couple starting pitchers. Is that a good summary, would you say, of what
I think so?
Yeah.
I'd say if you want to sum it up, like the highest probability, I think that the thing that I think happens before the end of the year is like, if you want to get specific, the rumors around King and Gallen makes some sense to me. Like if they end up with one of those guys and that is the penultimate move they make this offseason, like I think that's the highest probability outcome. But again, I'm really hoping, as I talked about, like there's some trade here none of us know about, none of us can ID. I can't even think. I'd have to go look at controllable pitchers that maybe could be traded. Like that is the thing that could make this whole offseason far more entertaining, I think, for Cubs fans to get everybody really excited for 2026.
Who could that name be?
I know.
If you're watching,
I'll think. I don't
let
know.
us. Yeah, shoot me a text, but also if you're watching, let us know in the comments who that random name might be. Lance, as always, man, super appreciate you, and just continue to love watching everything that you're doing on Marquee and on your YouTube channel, guys. Make sure you go check out Lance's YouTube channel. Just search Lance Brozdowski in YouTube and you'll find it. Thanks, brother. Appreciate you and enjoy the rest of the great weather in Orlando.
Great talking to you, man. Take care.